Well, today I am delighted to welcome Dee Blick, who's actually a best-selling author, has written no less than four books. She actually has a history as a sales-driven marketeer with 40 years experience and is known for her very practical approach to marketing, etc. But she's now doing something completely different, and her story is very inspiring. Of course, there's more to her story than what I've said so far, as you can imagine from the chosen title, From Addict to Amazon Best-Selling Author. But maybe, Dee, it's easier if I ask you to share a little bit about who you are and what you're doing or how you got to be a best-selling author before we get into the real talk, which is about resilience, change, fear. Who knows where it will take us? Tell us a little bit about who is Dee.
Who is Dee? Gosh, I'm still figuring it out, but I'm 62 and born in the north of England. And I guess I'm just a woman who I tumbled into marketing as a career because I loved words, I loved writing stories, and marketing seemed to love me. And so I built a fairly successful career, which I began to dismantle at the beginning of last year so I could focus on doing very different things. But along the way, I was able to really fulfill my love of writing to be able to write books. And as you say, I've written several books that have done okay. And I guess that's me in a nutshell. I just say that I am perfectly imperfect. I've had to battle demons along the way, some very big, some small, like anxiety. And so in a nutshell, that's me, if that's a good enough answer for
That
you.
is a very good answer. And of course, it's opening lots of many doors. I mean, I know you've been very successful in many things, but I know you also have lots of personal baggage as well and personal story. And to hear you say, we had a little chat beforehand, to hear you say how you're scaling back and, it's great. You're glad you did your marketing and you loved it also with it attached well with your desire for writing and you were able to stand on stages and share that with people, but that you're feeling there's more to Dee than that Dee, than the successful businesswoman and the writer of, books mostly around marketing. Because if I understand well, you're now launched into fiction.
I am, yes, and that's something that I think I reached that age when I got to 60. I was just aware that there was a lot less in front of me than behind me. So it was really a bit of a defining moment. Where do I want to take my life and what do I want to do? And my husband, because he gave up his job so I could become the breadwinner and he could then look after the house and our boys. And he'd always said, just do what makes you happy. And so I was able to just think, when I hit 60, I'm going to scale down and I'm going to enjoy myself. And then after a few months, the thoughts were in my head, I really want to write a fiction book. And I was asked by a journalist the other day, what made you want to write fiction? And I just said, I've written it all my life. I've written little stories from being an 8-year-old girl when I went through a lot of trauma and creative writing became my bolt hole. So it was almost inevitable that I would write a fiction book because part of me, it sounds very American when I say this, but part of me is honoring that 8-year-old little girl
Yes.
that was full of fear, having to handle some pretty horrible stuff. And she found her way out through creative writing. And
Right.
then it was an absolute imperative that I write just to keep myself in check. But now it's for the love of it. So it was just, I'm going to write this fiction book, which I'm sure we'll come on to later. But yes, it's consumed my every waking hour for the
Yeah, it's a
last,
passion. That's what you say. It's
yeah, yeah,
consuming, right?
yeah,
But so this is a story that's been wanting to come out for a while. And if I understand well, so you gave your 8-year-old a voice on paper, but now that voice is also going to be coming out in the world. Is she also featured in this fiction book?
she is. And I think I'm writing under a pseudonym. So I've just said to people that have been speaking to me, you'll have to guess which character I am in the book. But to be honest, when I share my story about addiction, people will know immediately who that character is. But I really wanted to, it's about honoring the person that I was then and being grateful for the person I am now, because I've never been able to. Today is the first time I'm telling it to you in all its glorious technicolor. I've never been able to do it because my parents were still alive. And as any woman will tell you that's gone through a traumatic childhood, there is still a feeling of guilt that what did you bring to the table to warrant everything that went on around you? And I don't have that now. I stand in my I stand in my power now. I stand
Yes.
in my own confidence as a mature woman. And I'm able to tell that story of that young girl and as she went through her life to the point where she is today. And although it is very much a fiction book, it's that the rest of the characters are a mix of women that I've met over the years and my own very vivid imagination. It's really a fusion of fact joining with fiction to make compelling stories that are not roses round the door. It's about
Right.
inspirational women coming through, of which, and I have to acknowledge this, I am one of them. I can look at my life in an objective way and think, you know what, girl, you came through that. And it's not a boast, it's just an acknowledgement that you survived the toughest times for you. Obviously, there are people who have gone through much harder times than me, but for me, it was very
Yeah.
real. And I guess I wanted to share the message in the book that neither a troubled or a traumatic past has to define us or to hold us back. And in fact, if we marshal these experiences and if we marshal our resilience, they can in fact become our superpower because
Mm.
they give us confidence to move on to things that, were we to compare what we're doing now with what happened back then, you think, blimey, if I could get through that, I can definitely do this. And so that's the message that I want to carry to women in the main
Right.
about how people talk about survivor guilt and it all sounds very dramatic, and I'm a very northern woman, so I'm always mindful that I don't want to be appearing too American in my pronunciations. But yeah, I think that we can rise above and really claim our power. And how great is it that if we can do so later in life when we have that cloak of experience and confidence
Yes.
and compassion, and
Yes.
feistiness, being a bit sort of like smart and savvy. We don't have to prove ourselves to anybody
Exactly.
anymore. We've gone through all that stuff in the past. It's like here we are now, standing in our power and thinking, you know what, I can write this book and hopefully it'll do a bit of good. It'll shift a few copies. And I'll have women writing to me saying how much it meant to
To
them.
them. Right, because that's what you're saying. It is full circle. It's taking something that you hadn't chosen, right, which happened to you. So I'm hearing you say very many things here because it's very, very inspirational what you've just shared, but also from the point of view that, so we don't choose, some things happen to us, and particularly when we're children, we sort of accept them. We're not quite sure what we're supposed to
Yes.
do with them, and then we find whatever coping mechanism works for us, and it takes us the rest of our life to unravel, work out, what was really me, what was what I was told, what is, what do I now do with this? And as you said, that was very powerful what you said about obviously nobody's chosen these traumas, whatever degree of trauma they are, but you do have a choice to what you make it mean to you as a person. And so that you have that choice to sort of say, you know what? That is not who I am. That feistiness you were talking about, and with that, there's more to me than just that. There's the me inside before the trauma. What's happened to her? She
Yeah.
was there from the start. She's also allowed to get out and play. So it's taking it. You can't erase it. It's taking it, but managing to control it in whichever way it works for us. Some people it's forgiveness. Some people it's just doing all sorts of therapies. Some people it's just, saying, okay, this is it. I now remove it from my body. And also what you're saying with age is I think we get that little bit ability to distance ourselves a little bit and actually look at, okay, but that's not all of me. That is something that happened to me. And this is, you were talking about addiction. We'll get into that. But I guess that came afterwards, was maybe a way to
Yes.
cope with what had gone before. We take whatever mechanisms make sense to us at the time to cope. And then you're actually, so having moved beyond that, having risen above that, having said, this is me in all of my glory, with all my warts and pains and scars, this is me. And now you're actually giving it back. You're actually giving
Yes.
back by writing something that other people can relate to, either because they've had similar stories, either because it puts their stories into perspective, where you think, okay, girl, get a grip on yourself, let go of what you can let go of, resolve what needs to be resolved, but it's up to you to live your life. Don't let the trauma and the people involved with the trauma have a hold on your life your entire life. It's easy to say from the outside, right? I do not have a big trauma to cope with, but sometimes I do feel like saying to those around me, but what about you? Don't let that person or that event sway than the rest of your life. He or she or they
Yes.
swayed it then, and you were powerless. You didn't know how to, cope with this, what it meant, if it was even wrong. We're just so vulnerable as children. But now you can say, enough, enough. Now I don't want to have any influence of you in my life. Not thinking about it, not regretting it, not dreading it, not whatever. I do not want that influence in my life. I want to be me.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I accepted that. I mean, the other thing I don't want to do is diminish anyone's trauma, because it's not a competitive
No.
continuum of my trauma's not as big as yours, or my trauma's much more than yours. I think that we all have our own dragons to slay, and it's how we let those dragons define and grip onto our lives. And so I've had to go through, well, I'll talk about addiction, what I had to go through when I gave up addiction to alcohol. I've had to go through counseling, a lot of soul searching, a lot of work with, I would say, very spiritual people. And so it's amazing how things can hang on to you. You can be at the pinnacle of your success, which I was,
Mm.
but you can still have these little demons and dragons to slay. And so we all have our own journey. I think my message is, don't suffer in silence. I did it too much as a little girl. I suffered profoundly for years with the most horrendous anxiety and panic attacks that actually made me physically ill. And I look back at that little girl and that young woman and think, gosh, I would really hope that today there's help available, that there's
Mm.
acknowledgement of that suffering. And so I was just a woman where you just, as a little girl, you just got on with it. You didn't
Mm.
complain. You just internalized it. Or I was so saying to somebody the other day, I have that mask of studied indifference where you didn't know that at the back of me, I was panicking like mad until I ran away. I could be in the middle of talking, then I ran into another room to have a panic attack, because it just wasn't a situation where I knew that there was help available. It was not recognized. It was just,
Yeah.
oh, there's Dee again with one of her funny turns. And so I think that's my overwhelming message, is that today we live in a world where, thankfully, mental health and being mentally unwell for whatever reason, it's recognized and it's no longer stigmatized. I don't think it was stigmatized when I was little. It just wasn't talked about. Your
Right.
parents get divorced, you get plunged into this really unpleasant situation, and you crack on with it. You start a new school with strangers, your mother's got a horrible boyfriend, and you just suck
Yeah.
it up. And
Yeah. And
that doesn't
nobody's
have to
asking you
be,
what you want, are you?
no, that's right. So you just internalize everything. And that's where my gift for writing began. So there are good things that came out of it. But yeah, we all have our own hills to climb and our own little battles. And they each mean as much to us as to the next person who might have even more of a horror story. But
Right.
to us, ours is enough for us to think, gosh, I need to get help for this.
Exactly. And that's very good that you say that as well, because I think a lot of people do feel, oh, but it wasn't that bad what happened to me. But if it's bad to you,
Mm.
if it's influencing you and stopping you from being happy, from being at ease, like you were saying, you were triggered in certain situations, so situations which had nothing to do with what you've gone through, but a part of it was triggering something. So it was leading your life. So however big or small, it's what does it mean to us, the big or the small? And from the point of view that, more and more, I think with the age, I'm coming down to the fact that all we're actually here for is to be happy. It's to be happy
Absolutely.
so that we can contribute what we've got to contribute. We can help other people be happy. We can, I'm not just talking about a whole bunch of fat Buddhas sitting there beaming. I'm talking about, that happiness that comes where we then are compassionate to other people, where we are helpful, where we look for solutions, where we try to solve things. That all comes from a place of happiness. And if there's anything whatsoever holding us back, I believe it's in a way our duty to either look at it and deal with it in whichever way makes sense for us, or to just let it go. Just sort of
I
say,
agree. I totally agree. And I think as well that I think I alluded to it earlier that I'm at a stage now where, for the first time in my entire life, I'm comfortable to come on to an interview with you and talk like this. I've never
yeah,
ever done this
yeah,
before, never done it because I've always, we have as people, we have many masks we wear, we're like a diamond, we have all these different facets. And so for years, it was entirely appropriate for me to bounce around on a stage
yep,
talking about marketing, talking about books. I wasn't there to unburden my soul. It would have been highly inappropriate. People were inviting me as a best-selling author, not as somebody that was sharing
mhm,
her past angst and how she got up to it, through it, and over it.
yeah,
Whereas now, that's not the case. And so it's a big leap for me even doing the interview because I'm not comfortable speaking like this. I've been
mm,
comfortable speaking like it in addiction circles of recovering
right.
addicts. I've done that for 25 years, but to do this now, it's part of me thinks, gosh, I hope people don't think, oh, she's a bit of a, I don't know, she's been a
No,
bit sugary or trying to get onto a bandwagon because I'm not, because as I said to you at the start of this talk,
no, I think
there's
you're
nothing I
being
want to
very
gain.
honest. No, exactly. That's what's beautiful. I mean, I even, for the rest of you listening, I even asked Dee, is there anything particular that you would like to promote, a service, as a side product at the end, because we're all about creating value here. And she said, no, she was
No, there's
literally,
nothing.
you're here to share your story and to share how writing has helped you. Now, okay, let's say there are people listening who recognize, issues that they've got to deal with. Do you have any tips? So we're talking about you went from, we talked in the title about from addiction to Amazon bestseller, but we're actually talking about from trauma to becoming a very successful marketeer to addiction to then becoming an author in a different way, as in not an author of textbooks or help books to do with your business, as in what you do, that businesswoman facet of you, as you said, where the other you was hiding in the background and she was needing the alcohol to cope or put it down, and certainly didn't want anybody to see that facet because it jarred, in your opinion, with the successful woman on stage. As you said, she wasn't there to go talking about the rest, but in the end, you are one person. And that's one of the very liberating things about age, is that we start owning all aspects of us and even bringing
Mm.
something good out of it. So you're
Yes.
literally here talking about what happened, and not in a sob, please be sorry for me, and aren't I wonderful, but in a you can overcome too, as in it's a generosity. It's inspiring people to think that they too can find that wounded little girl in there and give her a
Yeah.
voice in whichever way makes sense for them, right?
Absolutely. And I think I would say, you say about tips. For me, I had to go through addictive drinking for many years before I realized it was addictive
Yes,
drinking.
yes.
And then when I did, I stood to lose everything. And that's when I always say I found myself 4 days after my husband issued the ultimatum of you either stop drinking or you go and I will have the children. And he would take custody of our two boys. And 4 days after that, I found myself in a meeting with strangers. I say there were water leaking from my
Mm.
eyes, saying that ubiquitous phrase that we see in films, I'm Denise and I'm an alcoholic.
Workaholic. Oh
And that
gosh,
was the
yeah.
first time in my life that I had ever acknowledged and said it. And I wasn't kidding myself, it just hadn't occurred to me. And I think if I have any message to share of value to any woman who's going through her own struggles is acknowledge your struggles,
Mm.
stand back, look at yourself and realize that you may be in a state of dysfunctional chaos, you may be in a state of mental torment where everything around you is okay, but you are in mental torment. I think it's acknowledging that this is not conducive to a wholesome and happy life. I am not serving myself best. So
Yeah.
acknowledge it first of all, and then look at how you might be able to get some help. It might be that you're tentatively looking on the internet for sort of forms of acknowledged and healthy sources of support, but recognize that you're going through pain and that life is not meant to be this. Life is not
Yes.
meant to be pain. We are meant to be, as you said, happy and wholesome human beings. But I think for me, I recognized that I was going through trauma when I married my husband, and he was so normal and lovely that I had to unburden him of everything that had gone on in my childhood. He was a bit like, good Lord, how have you,
Yeah.
how have you coped with all that? And that was a healing thing for me. But the alcohol had a bigger grip over me than anything, and I didn't realize it at the time. So I think the thing about addiction as well is that we spend years deluding ourselves, often because it doesn't even occur to us that our abnormal behavior is normal. It's normal
Right.
to us.
Yeah.
And part of that process is being able to do a bit of a look at yourself and think, hang on a minute, is this really wholesome, healthy behavior? Is my behavior adversely affecting others? Am I having to cover up my abnormal behavior? Because if we find that we're starting to build a life that feeds our abnormal behavior, or we're starting to build a life where we're hiding it, we're being secretive, it's a sign that things aren't great.
Yes.
And so be honest with yourself. It hadn't occurred to me that I had a problem with, I knew I couldn't take alcohol normally, but it was only in the last year or so that I began to be frightened of my drinking.
Thank you. Yeah.
But even then I wasn't thinking, you know what, this is not normal. I was thinking, why am I like this? Why
Yeah.
can't I drink like other women? Why do I drink in this manner? Why do I
Yeah.
obsess? And of course, it all became clear to me when I joined a 12-step fellowship. And then it was like a room of 13, was 12 or 13 people, very different. And I identified with every single one of them. And I thought, blimey,
Yeah.
I'm in a home now. I've found a tribe of people that get me
And I
because I
don't need
get
to
them.
hide that they're
Mm,
like me, and I like these people as well. So it's not that you're a bad
absolutely.
person. Because
Yeah.
what you're saying also is very true. Is that first of all, we often don't see it, and we say, of course not. I'm just having a drink in the evening to relax, and that drink becomes two, three, four before you realize the whole bottle's gone. But we don't really want to see it. So maybe a little voice in us says, it's not right what you're doing, but we
Mm,
put it away because we're busy and we're doing other things. So it's also so nice to listen to other people, because I hear you saying, in this case your husband gave you an ultimatum, which was a bit of a, what is he talking about? Okay. But sometimes I guess we also have friends around us who make little comments, and we're a bit like, don't be silly, of course not. So maybe to listen, to open up as well to those that we like and care for, right? Not just anybody are saying, and to then, because it is that, it's first of all the acknowledgement, and then thinking there is something I can do about it. When you were talking before about different traumas and, is mine big enough to justify? I remember also years back, I wanted to work, or I realized again, same thing. It became apparent that there was something I needed to work on. But I was a bit like, oh gosh, I can't go and see a therapist. I mean, it's hardly terrible what's happened to me. It's, we put it down, and or we think we don't deserve it as well. We do all deserve the help, and it is there, but you do need to take that brave first step, which is part of the acknowledgement and saying, I need help.
it is. I think for me that my addiction was compounded by two things. One, my dad was an alcoholic, and he couldn't bear to think his daughter had sought 12-step help and was belonging to a fellowship. So my dad was like, what's all that about? But even before then, my family, not my husband, would diminish my drinking. Oh, well, Dee can't take her drink. And so they almost enabled it by, oh, you're fine. I had a job in marketing where I controlled huge advertising budgets. So the agencies would be taking me out on these extravagant lunches with drink. I could have champagne, I could have anything. They would invariably accompany me home in a taxi. And when I rang up the next day saying, how was I last night? Because I used to drink to blackout, which is a sure sign of alcoholic drinking. And I wouldn't have a memory of the night, but I
Oh
would remember
gosh.
things like snippets of noise. I'd go in the bathroom and see that my tights were ripped where I just dragged them off. And then I'd ring them and it was, oh, you were great. You were such fun. And of course I wasn't. I was an arsehole. But they sort of enabled it.
Yes.
I think also that because of my anxiety as a young girl, that accompanied me into being a teenager. So when I found drink at 16, it enveloped me in this warm
Confidence,
hug.
right? Yeah.
It enabled me to be who I wanted to be, but also I could put my feelings on a shelf. I could
Yeah.
think,
You
you
could
know
black them
what?
out, right? You could black
Yeah,
them out.
absolutely. I'm feeling really panicked now because I was getting the panic attacks and it persisted into me being in my late 30s. But I could think that's okay because in the afternoon I'll have a bottle of wine. It will make everything so much warmer. So alcohol gave
Mm.
me that rosy glow. And anybody who's been trapped in addiction, in my case, alcohol, knows there's a tipping point at which pleasant drinking and warm and fuzzy feelings, suddenly addiction
Mm.
really
Mm.
grips
Mm.
hold of you. And then you're in a bewildering space then where your behavior is totally at odds with your character. You're
Mm.
doing and saying things that in the cold light of day you would be horrified with.
Yeah.
But even then, I was still, I think, because of my anxiety and the enabling, I carried on. But eventually the credits run out, the tank runs
Yeah.
dry, and you're standing there
With the
literally
naked
with the
truth, which is
yeah,
ugly.
you get withdrawals. I remember the withdrawal symptoms of the shaking, the nausea, and then of course the panic was a panic from withdrawal from drink.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that
It's the
we
help which helped you out of there, right? It was being able to join a circle of people where you could relate and who then had tools to help people.
absolutely, you get spiritual advisors. I'm sure you'll have seen it that there are what called 12 steps, which are 12 steps, which is really you recognize that your addictions got hold of your life and it's not manageable. And you fundamentally embark on a more spiritual way of living because alcohol's a big hole inside of you.
Yeah.
You've
Yeah.
got to
Yeah.
fill that. And
Yeah.
basically,
Yeah.
you have to fill that with being content with yourself. And
Right.
that was really hard for me because, of
Yeah.
course, all the feelings of trauma begin to resurface.
Yes.
It is like,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, it was like I was looking back at this girl who, from the age of 8 to 16, didn't have a great time. And suddenly it's there in its glaring headlights.
Yeah.
But it was the making of me. I can't tell you that, Julie. It made me the woman I am today.
I
That
can see you're glowing, and I'm so grateful that you're sharing this with us because
Well, it's
this
the
is
first
something.
time ever. I've never
Oh, I'm even
ever done
more
this in.
grateful
So if
then.
I've never done it in 25 years, and so even as I'm sharing, I'm just thinking, trust your gut,
Yes.
trust your
Yes.
intuition.
It's happening now because it's meant to happen now. It was
Yeah,
another, it's another phase of your you're liberating yourself from all your
yeah,
demons.
and
And when we
helping other
hide
women.
them and we hide them or we hide them to ourselves and we hide them to others, we're not facing it. You're facing it, you're saying it, you're claiming it, and you're claiming how you got out the other side. And I think to a lot of people that will be extremely powerful and at whatever degree, because same thing, I can already sense people, oh no, but I don't drink till blackout. But still, do you drink in a way which makes you happy, makes you feel good? And I mean, I hear that also
Yeah.
constantly around me, the 50 plus not drinking as
Oh,
not feeling as good as before. One of my friends, you're talking about saying things. She actually she's also got her own podcast now, and she's a huge she indeed had one of those evenings where the next day she was told what she'd said and how she'd hurt somebody she really loves. And she said, that's enough. And she has never drunk a drop of
yeah,
alcohol since. And she's gone on a whole mission to say, and indeed, she's, as she said, there's more room then for the rest, for the spirituality, for the healing, for the radiating out to other people. So
absolutely,
this is
Julie.
let's finish up. Do mention the name of your book, though. And let me
Oh,
see,
my
did we go
book.
through all those? We went through all the tips, didn't we? I'm just seeing
We
we're
Yeah,
arriving at the end. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. Well, the
exactly.
book is due out in March, and it's called The Boutique, and it's 9 stories, eight women, one man, and it covers things like addiction, coercive control, blackmail, bullying. But the women are strong women. They get through it. They come out the other side, and it's very much fiction, but it's fiction that's got an edge to it that makes it just that little bit different. And so I'm immensely proud of it. And I just think, oh, if you say, what did I want from talking to you today? It'd be nice if people follow me on Facebook, because that's where I can chat. But I just want to sort of take that message out there that you don't have to suffer, and that your best years, if you're suffering, is to think that your best years lie ahead of you if you
True.
acknowledge and get help, because that's definitely my case. I thought I was a hopeless case. I was close to wanting to end my life. And I look back now and think, blimey, what a life it's been, and what a life there is
And
to
had I
come.
ever known that I would be then doing all of
Yeah,
this, I think we never know. And I think that's always something that keeps me in my darker moments, is that we never actually know what's around the corner.
no,
And I think in particular, what you've just said really resonates with me. In particular, if you've suffered some form of childhood trauma and you've been carrying this baggage behind you all these years, then by definition, your best years are ahead. And it's time to
yeah,
embrace them
yeah,
by doing what we can do in order to let that us live the life that she was actually brought here for. Right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Dee, thank you very, very much. I'm very much looking forward to the book. When is it due to come out?
It's March. I will let you know. It's
Do
going
let me
through
know.
layouts at the
Exactly.
moment. I will definitely let you know, because it's ironic. Normally I'd be pumping the book, all the books I've written before, and I'm just thinking, oh yes, there's a book to
That's the
promote.
marketeer in you coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have you back. We'll have you back when you're launching the book, and you can tell us
Oh,
about the book. Because it sounds like the book is also, let alone your story, this book is also an inspirational book
I
for,
hope so.
for women.
I had a lady reach out to me on Facebook. She started to follow me, and she wrote to me, said, "Oh, I love the sound of your book. When's it coming out?" And then she shared her story, and she said, "My husband, I've been a victim of coercive control, and in January, I managed to get an injunction. One of my characters in the book is also a victim of coercive control, and we were chatting about that, and she was so happy. And I just thought, you know what, Dee, that's why you wrote this
Yeah.
book, to have these conversations, and bit by bit. And I've got massive charitable stuff I'm going to be doing where I'm not making money, I'm giving it to charities that really touch my heart. And so I want this book to be a conduit of positivity and good action.
I think we can certainly do with a lot of that in the world nowadays. So thank you for that, Dee. And okay, so you mentioned you want people to follow you Instagram, Facebook. What's your
Facebook, yeah.
handle?
I'm just Dee Blick on Facebook. Just follow me, and then I love
Okay,
chatting to potential readers. I have readers from all over the world for the books that
fun.
I've written, but it'd be lovely to have conversations about this one.
Thank you very, very much. All the best
My
to all of
pleasure.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.